So start off by just saying this meeting's being recorded by the Open Space Task Force. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify me at this time. All right. We'll call this meeting to order. Thanks everybody for being here. Let's do a roll call around. Let's just start with the folks in their room there. Francoise, you want to start us off?
Yes, my name is Francoise Att, and I'm on the SIG committee.
Great.
I'm Kent Kenninger. I'm new here today. I live in Greenfield.
Great.
Pat Sarantino, I live in Greenfield, and I was interested in being on the committee.
Great. And then we'll switch over to Zoom here. Do you want to go Mary, then Emily?
Hi, I'm Mary Chicklin. I'm chair of the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee and a public member.
Hi, I'm Emily Boss. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission and on the task force.
Great. And I'm Jonah Keene. I'm the chair of this task force and on the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee. So thanks everyone for being here. My family is ill with COVID. I'm at the moment still not, so we'll see how long that lasts. But it has been a week where I've been a little behind, but I have prepped the stuff for us, so hopefully we'll be in good shape here for this meeting. So the first thing on the agenda is to just discuss the minutes from June and July. So we had two initial meetings that we held on Zoom just to get started with planning, and Mary graciously took the minutes for us. And I don't know, have folks had a chance to look at those, Emily, Francoise?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So do we have a motion for these minutes?
You move that we approve the June minutes.
Second,
All in favor? Or any discussion we have here?
I think I had one minor typo correction.
That you entered into the document?
Yeah, I had comments on both of them, so I'm trying to figure out which one this was.
Yeah. I see, it looks like in the you had a comment, a small comment in the July minutes.
Oh, I'm looking, are we talking about the July?
We're saying just June 1st, then we'll do July.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking at June. I know in one of them, instead of my last name, it said UMass, but I don't think this is the one.
Okay.
And if this is not the one, it was under public comments, Stephanie Duclos. No, I must be in the other one. Huh, strange. Okay. In that case,
right.
I take it back.
No discussion? All right, all in favor to approve the June minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, approved. And is there a motion for the July minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second, yeah.
Any discussion on July? Francoise added just a word missing on the public comment.
And yeah.
Yeah. Any other discussion on July minutes? All right,
Yep.
All in favor of approving the July minutes?
Aye.
All right. We have passed our minutes. Thank you, Mary, for taking those. Mary, are you okay with taking them for today as well? And then we can discuss how much longer you want that role.
Yeah, I can do it for today. And just
Great.
moving forward, I'm going to save the minutes as a PDF so they can't be edited in between because that can possibly lead to confusion. So
Okay. Sounds good.
So
Great.
any changes that people want to make, we'll make right in the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Mary.
Mhm.
Okay, the next agenda item for us is task force membership. So we have put out the request for people to express interest in joining. We have had 3 people express interest. 2 of them are present here, Pat and Kent. And I guess the one other bit, I can't remember if we spoke about this last time or not, is that we are technically a task force of the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee. And so if we were to add official voting new members, that it would have to be by the mayor, and it would add complexity that we were not prepared to explore. So the plan that we had talked about was having new members be technically non-voting members, which we didn't foresee as a major issue since we don't see ourselves as a major voting body of approving things. So the thought was that folks could still join the committee, but wouldn't be mayorally appointed. And yeah, Francoise.
Yes, I have a question, Jonah. You say we put out the call for members, but where? I didn't see it.
Yes, it was not put out broadly. I made some requests to folks there in City Hall, and there was not, I was not given a process. There's not a process for that, apparently. So it has not been put out broadly. I think it's been mostly word of mouth. So I don't know if folks had other ideas of approaches we want to take. I think we had discussed trying to get it on the town website, but
I was asking Matt just before, and he says you have to go to the city clerk.
yeah, I went to the city clerk, and what did she say? This was a while ago now, after our last meeting. I think maybe she just said she didn't know. Let me follow up with her again and see, and if she doesn't know, we'll try. I don't know. We'll try another approach.
How did I learn it? But was it in the recorder somewhere?
Oh, well, there was that after our first meeting, the recorder did do an article that said we're looking for members. Yeah, so that was probably the most public.
Where I found it, yeah.
Yeah, great. But yeah, I'll follow up with clerk. So we have 3 interested members, and Pat and Ken are here. I don't know if you each just want to share a little bit about why you're interested in joining for us all to hear collectively, would be great. I'll start with Pat.
Sure. I've been a resident of Greenfield for 30+ years, and I'm a retired wildlife ecologist. So I've been interested in open space for many years, and I've been, in the past, I was on the Conservation Commission. I also worked on one of the open space plans for Greenfield. This is quite, at least 15 years ago on that one. And, I walk in the town properties, and I'm just interested in, making sure that we take care of the open space we have, and also possibly get, some new areas. And that's, my major reasons for being interested.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thanks, Pat. And you've attended previous, or one or both of the previous meetings, so you have a sense of what we've been talking about as far as our goals and what we're aiming to work on.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, great. And Kent, you want to share a bit?
Well, I've been in Greenfield about 5 years, and I just fell in love with the city. It's amazing. It's an amazing place. Best place I've ever lived. And I've lived a few places. So I am interested in the open space, interested in helping around the Greenfield area in general. So this sounds like a good way to help. I had experience on the vineyard. We had a beach association, and also I did, I was just did a fair amount with Sheriff's Meadow, which does a lot of preservation on the vineyard. And I didn't it was basically some interactions between us and them and that sort of stuff. They're very nice people. And so obviously on the vineyard, they take that sort of stuff seriously. And currently I'm working on, I'm retired and I have some skills where I can apply them to dealing with global climate change. And so I'm right now working with some people to simplify where battery facilities and solar facilities should go and where they shouldn't. And so the first one I found out is the answer for forests is no, just never. And that's not clear to people. And then so I'm putting together why that is and make it very clear why. That's my first task. So we'll take all the open space you have and we'll put solar panels on it. No. So yeah, but that's what I'm interested in. So
yeah, great. And the third person, Lee Oldenburg, who has expressed interest, submitted a letter via email to me that is in our shared folder. And their interest is in large part around trails and trail maintenance. So that's the primary focus of their interest in being involved. So one thing we didn't discuss, the four of us pre-existing members, is a process for this. And my foggy recollection is that we had maybe said it's kind of low key since it's not a mayoral appointee and we can have members of the public join meetings. Anybody can join the meetings, but that we would welcome folks who expressed interest to be a part of the team. Is there, in other words, accepting the three people that expressed interest in being a part of this task force? Is there other thoughts on a more rigorous process that folks would like to see for this?
fine with me.
Yeah, Mary.
Two thoughts. One is that we could move forward with our activities for a little while and then determine if we feel like we need areas of interest and then put out a more specific call for participation. It's just an idea. The second one is, in order for us to follow, as I understand, open meeting law and, Robert's rules of order and all that stuff, that we just have to figure out, how members of the public will participate. I think maybe the vision is that they would become, full participatory members, but without voting privileges. And yet my understanding of public participation is that it happens through, the public comment period. So I don't know if we'd be stepping over any boundaries. If what I'm hearing what you're thinking about is having folks who are not members essentially serve in that role. I think we just have to be clear about what the law says about that.
Yeah.
Got a question.
Somebody who, I see that Stephanie is sitting in on the meeting and she's, patiently waiting until the public comment period. And so why should she be, sort of required to wait for that period? And then other people who are just, in general, they're just members of the public. Why can they be full participatory members? That's the question that comes to mind for me, is a process question.
Yeah. And I wonder if there could be different tiers. And I don't know as far as how open space meetings, the open meeting law is how that comes into play. But I would imagine I would see the difference being folks like Pat and Kent would be, their goals would be to help us advance the missions of this committee, where public that attend could just be more curious or have a particular issue that they would come occasionally. Although Stephanie has joined us 3 she's 3 for 3. So, so others may, decide to join us regularly as well. I don't know, Kent, what did you want to chime in with there?
Oh, you've covered it.
Okay, yeah. So for now, maybe the best thing is for us just to investigate. I think I'll add it to my city clerk questions, although I did ask some questions around this, and I think I just need to have a conversation with her because the emails were brief. Just to try to better understand what we're able to do. Any other thoughts on that process? Yeah, Francoise.
I mean, would the people who are interested in joining be still interested if they were nothing more than members of the public?
Well, I think Mary's point is if they're not able to engage until the public comment period at the end, then it's limiting. They wouldn't be a part of the conversation, ongoing conversation throughout the meeting, that it would be a designated public comment time at the end. So that would be awfully limiting for how they could participate.
There would be, in my opinion, there would be no advantage in being a member if they couldn't
Right.
participate during the meeting.
Right. Yeah. 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 These are the details that are outside of my scope. I don't know what's allowed with these things. So I think we just have to investigate some more. For the sake of right now, I'm happy to.
Point of order. I think I can answer this question. As the chairman, you can set up that committee on how you want to engage the public, and then ultimately take votes, but you can have an open discussion as long as it stays on track with the items on the agenda. That's, as the chairman, you can set up how you want your agenda to flow. Thank you.
That can include public comment throughout, you're saying?
Correct. They have some similar structure when the assessors are allowing me to engage and ask questions. They have a public comment at the very beginning of their agenda, and they don't close it, and then they address public comment again at the end of the agenda, so that if you had additional questions on what was on the agenda, you'd be able to engage them and potentially have those answered.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. That's helpful to know. Great. Well, yeah, we do not have that structure in our agenda at the moment. So let me investigate that a little bit more. Maybe that's an approach that we could take. And then in my mind, that's just sort of making sure that we have our T's crossed, but it's considering folks that want to be involved and help us accomplish the goals of this committee as members, to me, would make sense. So we'll just make sure that we're doing it all according to the open meeting law and not causing any issues there. So for now, we'll say that I will investigate that. And so Pat and Kent and Lee, if you're watching the recording, we'll table it to the next meeting to officially determine what the exact involvement and what that membership would look like. Anything else to add on that topic? All right. So moving on to the big part of the meeting, discussing the goals of our task force. So just to bring Kent and anybody watching the recording up to speed, we looked at the open space plan that already exists for the town. We went through and prioritized based on our individual preferences what we thought were areas of the open space plan that we would want to focus on as a task force, and then looked for areas of the most overlap between the four of us. So I'm going to share the document that we worked on last time, and then the organizing that I've done since then. How's this? How's the size of this? Do I need to make this bigger?
It's okay here. That looks good.
That helps.
A little bigger? Yeah, okay. So this is what we worked on last time. These are all of the goals, objectives, and actions from the open space and recreation plan, and we went through and ranked them on the right of different of what were priorities for each of us. So I took that and organized it into this, which is our tier 1 priorities. So what we determined were the top areas for us to focus on as a task force in the initial time that we're working here together, and then tier 2 priorities. So we can look through this quickly here. I can just kind of quickly peruse this and then switch over to the final tab here, which is the little bit more of organizing of how we might look at it. So the priorities that we determined as first tier, a number of them are in this protect, preserve, and enhance conservation areas. There were 4 actions from that objective that we thought were top priorities, all around protecting new land for the city. There's another one around helping city departments with their actions and how they interact with our open space and natural resources and the impacts that they have on them. And then, so that's all under this larger preserve, protect, and enhance open space goal. Under this next goal of increasing municipal and public awareness and understanding and enjoyment of our open space and recreation facilities, there are a few priority areas that we came up with, prioritizing ADA accessibility improvements, integrating the goals of the open space plan into city policies and plans, and additional mapping and prioritizing parcels for protection that fell under that category. The one thing I will note is that my task from last time was to look through the open space and recreation plan and add in any parallel actions that we had missed in our discussion last time. So a couple of these may be additions from last time that were basically in line with what we had been discussing. And then under goal C here, prioritize climate resiliency in open space. That had a few different actions that we were interested in prioritizing. Again, around protecting new land with a climate, using a climate resiliency lens, looking at zoning changes to protect land, and then also conducting a analysis of impervious surfaces in the city. And then lastly, on the tier 1 was a couple more goals that connected to protecting more land. This is in the develop and improve and promote open space connections. So one is around connecting open space and protecting new lands for connecting open space. And the other is looking at river connectivity. So those were the actions that fell into our tier 1 priorities, and then the tier 2 priorities were all under this goal A, preserve and protect and enhance our open space. And that included helping to increase the amount of volunteers working on our open space, particularly by getting a volunteer coordinator position off the ground. Maintaining trails at a few key parks in particular, and then some additional agricultural land protection through zoning and inventory of ag lands, looking at ways that we can improve the protection of ag land. So those are the actions that we had picked as tier 1 and tier 2 priorities. So what I did is I went through these and tried to think of how we could look at them in a more focused way. And so I made this other tab where I reorganized them, and I created a summary action or objective on the left-hand side, and then grouped all of the actions from different goals in the plan under that. So for this, what I thought we could do is I could read these summary actions, and I didn't spend an excessive amount of time on it, so we could chat a bit about them and see if there was changes that folks wanted to make to this before we finalize these as our priorities. So, yeah, Mary.
Clarifying question. So you're about to jump into this, and I just wanted to make sure I understood that you were only using the items that we had already prioritized. You didn't pull in other items, right?
I only pulled in ones that were the same concept. So there were
Okay.
there's a couple that were basically the same, that fell under the same larger action, but were not specific actions that we had talked about last time. And I could go through and highlight those, not at the moment, but they,
Yeah.
So this first one, and this was definitely the largest number of actions that kind of fell into this one bucket of identifying, mapping, and working with different parts of city government to acquire new conservation land, considering various factors, including the biomap, adjacency to existing conservation land, serving environmental justice communities, and climate resilience, including connectivity and flood storage. So that's how I summarize these various actions, that most of which I just read through on the other tab. Any initial reactions to that?
I think we need a little more time to read it and digest it, Jonah.
Absolutely, yeah. Just wondering, if there was initial reactions. If not, that's fine. We can move along.
I looked through it earlier today, Jonah. It seemed to reflect our conversation and seemed like it had lots to do, but many things that were doable to start. A question
Yeah.
I had was, is this the sort of stage at which we could start sharing this with the commissions or boards that we're part of? Or do we want to digest this a little more?
Yeah, we could see if we wanted to wait for us to finalize this and then share it, or if we want to wait to get that input before. That's a good question. Any thoughts on that?
I don't have any objection to share it as long as that doesn't mean we can't change it.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it would be nice to share it now, and we work off of this at the moment, but we don't need it to be, it can be a work, it can be a living document, right? It can be evolving, it doesn't need to be set in stone here. So we could work off of this, and as we get input from the Conservation Commission or the Rec Commission that has thoughts of, oh, maybe this shouldn't be on your plate, or or there's something else that we wish was, or whatever it was in the edits, we could take that into account. So I think that makes sense to me. Anything that, Mary, did you have any other thoughts on that?
It's good. I mean, it's already a plan that's been approved, so it's not like we're making stuff up, other than just, what you've done to try to pull the items together into, like categories.
Yeah. Yep. And actually, and there's some, I have a few thoughts on the next steps, which we'll talk about in a second. And it seems like that is a good next step, is sharing it with those couple other commissions at least. So we'll just read the second one here. So there's only 2 summary actions for our priorities. And I kind of lumped that the first one is a little clearer. They're all under that realm of mapping and protecting more conservation land. The second one, to me, made sense to kind of clump these together into this, but maybe it wouldn't to others. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So this is advocate for and assist with city departments considering and achieving goals of the OSRP, especially around open space maintenance and access and climate change preparedness. So this includes, these few different things that I mentioned before that are, they're not all connected with each other, but they're connected in the fact that they're harder for us to do on our own. I think the first one, there's a lot more that we can do as volunteers to move forward, and these fall into the category in my mind as ones that are a lot of communicating with other departments and commissions and making sure that others are thinking about these things. So any initial thoughts on that broad category?
Nope.
And nobody who thinks that approach is the wrong way to go initially, like, I don't think we should not be lumping those together, which I would be totally open to if somebody had that strong feeling about that. All right. Hearing nothing, we'll move on from it, but it's never too late. If you have a thought afterwards and you want to digest it a little bit more, and we want to rethink how we do this, we can. And then, so for tier 2, I did not have as much of a way of putting them together, although they could fall into tier 1 priorities. This maintain and improve city trails. That's one that's been discussed as a priority for some people. Supporting the volunteer program seemed somewhat of its own thing. And the ag land was another one that was, is similar to and can be connected with our first tier 1 goal, but there, in our prioritizing, it was definitely a secondary priority for us as a collective. So it made sense to me to have it be separate down here. Any initial reactions to these as our tier 2?
Seems good.
Yeah. Great. So my suggestion for next steps, and I welcome others to say differently, would be to use these for now until folks spend a little more time with them. If we want to change anything, and go through each one, particularly the first 2 tier 1 priorities, and talk about what our approach is going to be, what our next steps are, and how we see this open space task force moving forward and actually accomplishing work. Since so far all we've done is talk about what we're doing, that's pretty soon here we actually want to do it. So does that sound like a good step forward? Is just to look at least tier 1 priorities here and talk about how we might move them forward?
Sure.
There's a lot of police sirens out here. You're hearing that through my mic or no?
No,
I'm hearing it here as well.
Yeah. So this first one, and I would say the biggest one, and the one that I think show up as it was the biggest priority for me personally, and I think maybe for Emily, maybe Mary, a lot of these were high priorities on your list. And this is the reason that I was personally excited about the Open Space Task Force, is working on helping increase the conservation, the amount of conservation land in the city. So, so I think the big question for me is what we want our approach to be and what our next steps should be here. And we can stop sharing that. And we can just discuss a little bit of what we think are our next steps of actually implementing, doing some mapping and moving forward with trying to protect new land.
As a task force, what are the resources that are typically available to us in terms of mapping and technical support?
I don't know that there is much. I think I guess it would be in conjunction with the planning department, perhaps, that we would get the most support there. And I think we would want, and to me, a next step would be to connect with Eric. I did see that the conservation agent position is currently open. So hopefully we'll get somebody good in there that can work with us. But for now, Eric, seems like we should be in touch with him about what may exist. Or I don't know if Emily or Mary, if you have a sense of any mapping that exists currently that's being used to guide this type of work in the city.
I haven't plugged into recent mapping. It's been a couple of years since I've seen what folks are putting into that, stew of what they think the most important layers are. I mean, in terms of mapping, I feel like Mass Mapper's gotten a lot better. So that's a simple way to see if we can get at what we want first, is to just see if Mass Mapper will do it for us. I also have ArcGIS, so depending upon the complexity, it's possibly something I could do as well. I know in the past, Eric has made maps for sort of official business, so I guess it would just depend upon how we forge a relationship with the planning department. And I feel like in some ways that should really be a next step. It is talking with the planning department and finding out which of these priorities are things that are already being worked on in one way or another.
Right.
Because I would hate to see us start out by stepping on somebody's toes and then not being able to, mend that relationship. So
I think that's a great point with all of this, right? Since we are new and we don't have any city staff on our task force, we should make sure we're covering our bases and making sure we're not stepping on toes anywhere. So planning department, and I would think rec as well. Is there any other city entity that folks think we would want to make sure we reach out to at this early stage to make sure we're not overlapping or stepping on toes?
The Conservation Commission, but we're already, we're engaged.
You're engaged, right? Yeah. So yeah, so if you can fill them in on what we're focused on, and then we can, any input, would love to work as closely as possible with that group. So. Anybody else that we should be thinking about? DPW, perhaps? don't know, maybe not at this stage,
Maybe not at the stage, yeah.
but down the road. Yeah. Oh, lost Emily. Anybody else come to mind that we want to make sure we loop in before we get too far along?
Yes, we could touch base with FERCog too and see if they're currently working on any mapping that, or, you know, anything just in general that would overlap with what we're working on.
Yeah.
Also, you know, FERCog has a GIS specialist, Ryan, who might also be available to help us with some mapping. That's certainly something the COG has done in the past in an
Right.
informal sort of relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I think that would be excellent. And you still have relationships with folks there? Do you know who would be best to reach out to?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, should we divvy up? So if you want to take FERCog, Mary, to reach
Sure.
out to, and then Emily will be in touch with Conservation Commission. I'm happy to take. No, none of us have a particular rec commission or rec department connection. Happy to take that one. And maybe, I don't know, Mary, maybe you and I together could approach Eric, just since I feel like that's a big one, and we're on
Sure.
SGIC with him, and
Yep.
Great. So yeah, so I would see us basically sharing this priority process that we've come up with, and wanting just to get thoughts, make sure that we're not stepping on toes, what's already in progress, and what priorities do they have. So sounds good to me. All right. Hoping everything's all right with Emily. Lost power, perhaps. Okay, so other thoughts on our next steps? I think reaching out to those folks is a good call. And so Barry, you mentioned your mapping abilities and that you have ArcGIS. Not sure as far as a process, if we want to be devoting meeting time for us to be doing some of that collectively, or if there's some subset of us that looks at it outside of this meeting time and we share back. Any thoughts on the best way for us to accomplish that?
Well, I think we need to know what it is we want to, what's the point? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are we trying to find out? Rather than doing mapping just for the sake of mapping. So what are the questions we're looking to find out?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it would be good for us to outline that. And when we have here these various parameters of that are in these various action items. So you're saying after we talk with others to see which ones of these we would focus on.
Yeah, I would hate to see us go down the road and then find out that there's already, we did an analysis of that, you know, last week.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So maybe our first priority is just connecting with these other city entities and going from there. So Emily, we just decided so you're going to be sharing with Conservation Commission this information. And Mary and I are going to talk with the Plan Department. Mary's going to talk with FERCog, and I'm going to talk with the Rec Department / Commission to just get input from all those folks and to see what else might be in process and what their thoughts are on us moving forward with this.
Sounds great.
So, Jonah.
Yeah.
I do belong to the Deerfield and the Connecticut River Watershed Association, so if we ever need to communicate with them, coordinate with them, I can do that.
That would be great. I
I
don't
mean,
think
I don't
there's,
think they're gonna help us do much mapping, but if you want them to look at it and say, oh, we're really interested in this. I can-
right. Or to see, well, they're actually mentioned in here in one of the action items,
Yeah.
right?
Work
So
with, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, it wouldn't hurt to reach out to them to see what they're already doing as far as mapping key parcels that if they're actively working. I don't know how much. I know many years ago they were actively involved in land conservation. I don't know that they do much of that anymore. But maybe or Emily, I don't know if you've worked with them, if I have any sense of if they're actively involved in at least advocating for the protection of specific parcels.
The Deerfield River Watershed Association or
Or
CRC?
CRC, yeah.
Yeah, CRC, I think is very project oriented right now. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if they're holding easements presently.
Yeah,
Or new
right.
easements anyway.
yeah. Yeah, that was my impression, but it's worth, I would say it's worth reaching out. Francoise, if you want to just,
Yeah,
see
I mean-
see what they're up to.
Both of them, get grants, and so I'm not sure I know all about what they're working on. I could
Mhm. Yeah, great. Sounds good. All right. Any other thoughts on next steps with that first summarized action? Your point's a good one, Mary, that there's a lot in there. And so we do want to figure out where we're focusing it. I mean, it's a lot of different layers that we're looking at, and it would be interesting to look at them together and see where there's a lot of overlap and see, oh yeah, here's some parcels that check a lot of boxes. So I think it could be helpful for us to be looking at a number of these, but seeing what else is happening first sounds smart to me. Yeah. Great. So I think so for next step for that one, we're doing some outreach with other groups. How about for number 2, the advocate for and assist city departments with achieving some of these specific OSRP goals? And I can put this back up here too. So this is where we're looking at a number of different things. Some of them are pretty broad. I'd say these first 2 are quite broad. Establishing a practice of cooperation and communication between city departments during regular maintenance activities and when issues come up to prevent impacts to natural resources. And also integrating the goals of the open space into city policies and plans. Those are big. Those are really big actions. The first one, I guess, a little less so, but what do we think is a way for us to get started with thinking about these?
Didn't this come up at the SGIC, our last meeting, and Carol said, yeah, that's great, but not gonna happen, right? It was a little discouraging.
Yeah, she was kind of down on the effectiveness of having various goals that for our city departments, and that they're not going to be able to actually focus on them. So I mean, it could be helpful in the SGIC world, Mary, too. I mean, I was interested when she was talking about that, just to talk more about that with her and see, like, we want to figure out how to be effective, right? We don't want to start down paths that are not going to actually make a difference. It seems like she's tried a lot of things. So it could make sense for us to talk more with Carol in general about SGIC work and this task force, and just get some general ideas of how do you make a difference and actually get city departments to focus on some of these action plans.
My observation about these first two actions is that for me, those are not actions that would be taken on by a fledgling group such as ourselves until we have some amount of, I don't know, until we have some experience under our belts. I mean, I can't imagine us going, and telling DPW to, play well with whoever, the rec department, whoever it is. It's not our place to do that. So I think this would require a lot of thought about what are those leverage points, who are the people that can make that happen, and how can we help with it. But it really isn't, to me, I wouldn't feel comfortable. I mean, I think these are really essential actions, but I think they might not be the first on our list to approach.
I wonder if we approach it, if we more take advantage of our newness and not come at it with the approach of, here we are trying to make this happen, but more, we are a new task force that's trying to implement goals in the OSRP. What are your thoughts on it? As we're going to these other departments, I go to the rec commission and just say, hey, this is a goal in the OSRP. What are your thoughts on this goal? And is there a role that, like, what's needed to help make this happen? How much is it happening already? What's needed? Is there a role that's needed outside of what you're able to do? So more of a like information gathering, and we're new, as opposed to us coming in saying that we can make it happen. What do you think of that, Mary? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's possible.
Yeah. The alternative would be that, yeah, that we just table those for now.
What do other members, Emily and Francois, think?
I would hate to table it. Whatever little bit we could do, if we can think of anything. I think, I mean, I'm really disappointed to hear that it's kind of a non-starter, because if the town departments can't even, do things right by, to protect and conserve our environment, then we can't possibly ask, commercial people to do it. I don't know. To me, it's pretty important. So I understand that we can't just tell people, obviously, you need to do this or else what. But as Jonah said, if we can start a conversation and see, well, what would help? What are the obstacles? Why are they not interested in following these recommendations?
I think those are good questions. I think a lot of it, at least what my little experience is, that everyone's working at capacity, and it's not a matter of not wanting to do things better or more integrated, but there's just lots of little structural obstacles. And a lot of it probably is just there's routine that doesn't include maybe talking to another committee first, or, there maybe aren't these avenues of communication that are regular. So, that top goal, establish a practice of cooperation and communication between city departments. Really, that is hard for us to tell people to do, but we are in the place to be able to ask questions, or to just observe, or to start finding out what the avenues of communication are. And then, probably it would work best for us to work with the committees to find out what they're open to, but then also to make recommendations about changes. I'm really struck looking at this whole section about how different the pieces are. Like,
Mhm.
prepare for increasingly heavy rain events causing more stormwater to enter streams and rivers, and the analysis of impervious surfaces is utterly different from establishing a practice of cooperation and communication between city departments. And one's very specific and almost objective, and another is systemic and broad and very vague. And the other one that stood out to me was just establishing the permanent open space and recreation committee. That's one, I think it was actually in another section too, maybe, but that's more specific to us rather than us trying to affect the operations of lots of other boards and committees. So I just feel like looking at this section that there's pieces that we could be very practical and concrete about, and then figure out which are the other entities that we could engage, or, see if is there a funding that's needed, so that then we could be advocating for that. And then other pieces are maybe longer term, or trying to identify specific individual acts, like I remember, just thinking about checklists, for making sure that when a development project comes up, making sure that all the boards that should give input to protect the environment are always being consulted. Maybe that's already the case. We could find out very easily about that kind of thing. It's very objective. But what's difficult is affecting sort of like, sort of more environmental factors or more informal elements. So I think that those would be the things that'll be hard for us to do something about in the short term.
Right. Yeah, so I guess it begs the question of, do we modify this as areas where we focus on? And I hear Francois's enthusiasm for it, and I know we're all enthusiastic about it happening, but some hesitancy from Mary and Emily for us to try to approach these broader ones.
Yeah, I think the approach of wanting to provide assistance and also identifying areas where that could be strengthened might be sort of good strategies for tackling this. And,
Yeah.
Thinking small and specific rather than broad and systemic.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I also wanted to add, I know that these first two action items are similar to some of the conversation that Greenfield Tree Committee is having around how do we affect change in terms of policies and practices about how various departments, approach trees, whether it's, a new development thing, or if it's a maintenance thing or whatever. And again, it's a really difficult, area to know how to approach, because, as Emily said, I think a lot of the challenges are that people are You know, a lot of the departments are understaffed and they're working at capacity. I would push back and say, I don't think it's because people don't care or don't think it's a good idea. I think it's just more they're already overloaded. So trying to change practices and policies is just really difficult. So, I mean, I feel like us trying to approach these couple of systemic items as like some of our first, you know, goes at something, it's going to be very, I think it might be very frustrating and you know, challenging for us to be successful.
Right.
And not just annoy city staff, essentially.
Well, I wonder, and this is perhaps just bookkeeping here of sorts, but I wonder if it makes sense to move this to a tier 2, and to keep our primary focus on this protection of new land, and have this more have this second area more as something we're interested in as we have the capacity and the ability to make change.
Yeah, I would be up for considering that. And I think also when we did this, you know, the initial prioritization process, at least in my mind, I was thinking of tier 1 as being the most important and tier 2 being less important. But I think we could also think of tier 1 and tier 2 as what things can we reasonably approach early on in our, you know, our time as a group together, and then what things make sense to leave until a little bit later on, until we have more experience as a group, and maybe find some ways to make inroads.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to feel like we're demoting these, because I think we all really agree that they're super important, but they're maybe just further down the road in terms of time, you know, timing.
You know, that's a very good point that maybe we haven't vocalized previously of what priority means, and that I have been thinking of it as our priorities, based on what our interests are and the things we want to put our time towards, which is slightly different from just what we think is very important. So I think that's a good distinction that we hadn't really discussed. So in my mind, this is a structure for us to help focus our work. And so putting this as tier 2 would not mean it's less important, but that it's less of our initial focus. So to me, that makes sense.
Although back to what Emily was saying, I think some of the action items within number 2 could still stay as you know, tier 1, because they're less broad, more specific.
Yeah, I'm curious about, I mean, definitely compared to those first 2, although I think the reason that I had bunched them is that they're ones that are pretty hard for us to, you know, there's still kind of an advocating role, although maybe the river corridor overlay district is one that's more, but I think, as we had said in our last call, like this last one, which I think a lot of us were interested in, the analysis of the impervious surfaces, would be something that we would have to be advocating for that to happen. Even though it's a very specific thing, it's not something that we are going to undertake ourselves. Is that a correct understanding of that?
I think it's a question, you know, of we have that column there of responsible board or group, and so those are some of the entities that would probably work on that. But it does sound like a pretty big project. Another approach would be for us to pick an important project like this one, and then use that as an example for us to learn about what kinds of coordination there is between different boards, ways that we could affect better communication, rather than it being just abstract.
Right,
That's an opportunity as well.
right. Yeah. So we could pick one as basically a place to get started and to learn a bit. Right. I like that idea. Um,
Well-
Something else to think about too, in terms of what our priorities mean, just to sorry to interrupt you, are what people's background and interests are. When I was reading the applications from the folks like Pat and Lee who had submitted them, it was really interesting seeing why people were interested in joining and helping. And a lot of it seemed to be about interest in our public areas, both as conservation and as public access. So, that's important too. What are we going to get investment from?
Right.
One of the second tier items is getting volunteers engaged in the properties.
Mhm.
And even though that's a pretty big undertaking, that might be something that we should consider, whether that is a higher priority. I guess we just have to figure out how much can we take on and what kinds of things are we going to take on. But another factor to consider is what are people going to be drawn to assist and to participate in.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
What I was going to say was, as you're showing this to like and I think DPW would be a good one, is like, I'm looking at the last one to conduct the analysis of impervious surfaces. I mean, we might find that somebody's already working on that. I
Yeah.
can't be surprised if nobody's done that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so maybe that does bring us back to reviewing all of this, not just that first
Yeah.
goal, but reviewing all of this with these different groups that we're going to talk with, and just getting a sense of where they're at and where they see if they, yeah, maybe I'd be curious to hear if DPW says, if this is not currently happening, this analysis, if they see it as a priority. Because that would be two different things. If it's like, if they didn't see it as a priority, would be different than if they saw it as a priority, but they weren't sure how to get started with it, or they didn't have the funding or something like that, which is where we could potentially assist with looking for funding sources or finding a consultant that might be willing to help.
Yeah.
Well, what do we think? So does it make sense for us to bring this larger, so this whole tab worth of actions to these different groups that we're going to talk with and getting their feedback on? I mean, it would take more time. It'd be more than like a 5 or 10 minute update if we were to go through all of these to get their input on. But I think that's okay if they're open to it.
It seems like a big ask
Mm.
of people's time. I wonder if there's a way we could sort of, simmer it down to just some questions. Because I don't know, maybe it's just me, but when I look at a sheet like this, my eyes do glaze over. It's hard to grab onto these items and to ask somebody to step through each one of these. It's going to take a long time, but maybe there's more general questions we can ask, like around who's doing mapping of whatever it is, or who's thinking about ADA accessibility, what's going on with that.
Another thought I just had too, just looking at this column F, where planning is in almost all of them. And I wonder if that's a longer conversation we start with Eric to kind of go over this a bit and get his input, and he might have a sense of what other departments are up to, and maybe it's just one longer conversation. We take Eric's time and not everybody else's time.
Yeah. I think that sounds right. And I think my experience with Eric is that he's been very willing to do this kind of work, you know,
Yeah.
to step through these kinds of documents. And I would feel more comfortable starting there. And then, you know, maybe we'll understand that, oh, well, for Conservation Commission, we really just need to know these two things, or, you know what I mean? Rather than having to go through the whole document with each group that we've talked about.
Right. Yeah, and that's, you know, if we use that column F, which I don't know how, you know, how much thought went into that column, but as our guiding, like Conservation Commission's only on these first two, they're not mentioned on those. So, you know, we could just mention the ones that they're included on. You know, I noticed somewhat of a sidebar. The Greenfield Tree Committee, Mary, is mentioned in a lot of them. Some of them are exclusively the responsibility of the Greenfield Tree Committee. So there's a lot on your plate there, I noticed.
Well, I mean, yeah, a lot of these, well, I can't say a lot, but some of these actions and strategies stemmed from Greenfield Tree Committee. We wanted to get them into the open space plan so that we could, you know, better leverage, you know, so that we could have better chances of pursuing funding.
Right.
To elevate some of these things from just being, oh, it's just the, you know, the sweet little Greenfield Tree Committee, to a more substantial, you know, home for some of these recommendations. So. Yeah,
I think that's great. I was surprised to see the number of them. I was like, oh man, it's a lot on your plate. That's great. Okay, so we need to be moving along here time-wise, but it seems like we have a plan that Mary and I will work to meet with Eric, or if others are interested in joining us, welcome to as well, to meet with Eric as a starting point. When's your next Conservation Commission meeting, Emily?
In 2 weeks.
Okay, great. So maybe we could meet in the next couple of weeks with Eric if he's available and you are, Mary. And I don't have COVID next week. We'll see how that goes. Make some progress on who's already doing what, and where others are seeing priorities.
Yeah, if I could bring something back, I think that the Conservation Commission at least would be interested in digging into things and reviewing things.
Yeah.
They're
Great.
very interested.
Yep. Great. All right. Is that a good place to leave that? Anything else that folks want to chime in with? All right. Sounds good. All right, moving on. Any announcements?
So I did eventually go to the Ag Commission meeting and explain to them what we do. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm, at least from the chair, on fostering more community gardens, which was one of the things somewhere in one of our plans. When I mentioned one of the goals that we had here about, it was something about zoning, you know, changing some kind of zoning for ag land. There was one member who sounded very much against that, like saying the least regulation, the better. So that was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the develop through local zoning and agricultural overlay district in order to encourage the preservation of ag land. Yeah, so they were opposed to that.
Well, at least one of them was. Yeah.
Okay.
That was interesting to see, you know, the opposite point of view. Like,
right. Yeah.
You know, we think it's going to help, but it sounded like he thought that was putting barriers.
Right. Yep.
Okay. And I think I mentioned, I made a correction in the SGIC, our work in the SGIC, that one thing was to have signs made that Greenfield is a right to farm community, and they're already doing that. So,
Mhm.
check.
Yeah. Great. Excellent. Thanks, Francoise. Anything else? Any other announcements that folks have?
Nope.
All right. We have our last bit of time for public comment, which is Pat and Kent at this point. Having listened to this conversation, anything else that you two would like to add?
Good to know what you got, what you do. Eventually, it might be able to fit in.
Yeah. Great.
So, I just want to make sure, so by the next meeting, we should know whether or not we can comment on things, because
Yeah, I'm gonna try to get to the bottom of this, and I will email you what I learned, so you don't have to come to the next meeting to learn it. And hopefully we'll have some clarity. So yeah, thanks for your patience and your interest in helping with this.
and I guess the other thing would be, is there any way that Kent and Lee and I can get a copy of your priorities, that whole document there that we were looking at?
Yes. Yep, I can share. And it probably should be shared publicly somehow, especially once we get to a point of it being what we're working off of. Oh, Mary, were we thinking of somehow getting a presence on the website? There's SGIC has a presence.
So SGIC has a web page on the city's website that is a place to talk about any projects. So that's where we talked about the Conway School events, for instance. It's not the best
Yeah.
place for things, but there is also Sustainable Greenfield's Facebook page. So that's a possibility, although it's not the best place for a document like that to reside.
Right. Well, on the SGIC page, perhaps we could at least put this recurring meeting, that we exist and that there's this recurring meeting time. Maybe that would be the one thing to put there.
Yeah, let's look into that. I will. It seems like that would fit on the Sustainable Greenfield, the committee page. So there's if you go to committees, boards and commissions, I think is what the page is called. And then you click on SGIC, that just tells who we are, what our makeup is, the committee members, and maybe something about the charter or whatever. And then the other page that I mentioned is more of a, what the group is working on. So I'm not sure where, I think actually where our official documents and our minutes should reside would be on the on the actual committee page.
Yeah.
And so maybe you and I could talk about that afterwards, because there's been some changes to SGIC and.
Right. Okay. Great. All right. If there's no other comments, our next meeting, our new recurring meeting time, starting with today's meeting, is now second Thursday. So our next meeting is October 10th, also at 4:45 p.m. start time. And we'll stick with this hybrid model until there's some reason to change that. We'll stick with this. Mary.
Can I just get the spelling of Kent's name, please, for the minutes? Last name?
It's Koeninger.
Okay, thank you.
And I will send around a draft minute draft agenda for our next meeting. I am curious, particularly now that we're getting through this stage of figuring out what we're doing and moving towards doing, how we want our meetings to be structured, since the bulk of our time in these first 3 meetings has been discussing our priorities. So I welcome input on that and ideas when I'll send out the draft agenda. And if you have thoughts on other things to include, please let me know. All right. With that, thank you all. Appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you.
We have to do a roll call to adjourn.
Oh, yeah. What do we have to do? Oh, yeah, we have to just say all in
I can't
favor.
believe I'm the one who's like reminding of these things, because this is not what I normally know
This is
about
not,
at all.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
there you go. Perfect. Hey, all right, we're following the rules.
I second.
All right, thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. That passes. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourned.